All right, well, good morning. It's good to be with you at this time. It's midweek devotional time, and I won't keep you too long. And we'll take a look at our text here in the book of Galatians, and something me and John Isaac have been talking about. And certainly, I think we minimize the meaning of this. I think that we need to take a holistic look, if you want to put it that way, on walking by the Spirit. That simply means you live by the Spirit. Your breath, every breath you take is of the Spirit. So it is a matter of whether or not we want to be pleasing to God and serve God, or we're going to serve ourselves or the flesh, whether or not we're going to exist by the Holy Spirit, or we're going to exist by the spirit of man, who does not know much, but we know the Holy Spirit knows all. And so it makes sense that the Holy Spirit would be the choice to be made as far as how we live our lives. And certainly life isn't lived for a little while and then set on the side. It's continuous. So we are to continue in the Spirit, continue to live by the Spirit. And in the book of Galatians chapter 5, and I recall the book of Genesis at this point, when God's breathed into the nostrils of man the breath of life, and he became a living soul. Folks, if we want to be a living soul, we want to be alive, then we've got to operate by living things, by the living God, and not by dead works of the flesh. Not by that is dead, right? That's what God said to Adam and Eve when sin came in. He said, "You shall surely die when you rebel, when you take of this fruit." And man surely died and was separated from God spiritually. So we that are saved and are the children of God, we have been restored, and we have a new life to be lived. We have real life to be lived. So this is what it's talking about. We want to live in freedom and liberty, not in the bondage of sin. So chapter 5, the book of Galatians, verse 16, it says, "This I say then, walk in the Spirit." There's more to that, right? Than, like I said, than walk. We are to live. We are to exist. Everything we do continually from the point of salvation, which opens the door for us to be able to live for God. Because before we get the Holy Spirit back, before we get renewed and restored, redeemed, where we're not separated any longer because of sin, because Jesus took the sin out of the way, then we have a new life in Jesus. We have a new life. We can live that life then. We have the ability through that born-again existence that we have now. And it says, "Walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not," because fulfill the lust of the flesh. We don't want to do that, right? We don't want to fall into the trap, the snare, the slavery of sin and the flesh. We don't want to do that. So if we don't want to do that, we've got to go and live in our liberty. You know, when a slave back in the days of slavery in this country would go through the Underground Railroad or escape into a free state, right? They stayed in those states. They didn't want to fall. They didn't want to go back into, because as soon as they crossed that state line into a slave state, they could be abducted and brought right back to bondage. And we don't want to do that. We want to stay in the free state. That free state is by the Holy Spirit, by Jesus Christ, and living for Him and living by that Spirit. So it says that we don't want to fulfill the lust of, we don't want to go back into that bondage. It says, "For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit." Don't trust your flesh. Only trust the Holy Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that ye cannot do. Now get this, because this is important. Light and dark cannot coexist. They don't get along with one another. And so it's what he's talking about. The Spirit of God and the Spirit of man do not get along. They are contrary. They're enemies of each other. And it says, if we don't realize that, we don't recognize that, if we don't live continually in the Spirit, it says, so that you cannot do the things that you would. What's keeping you from the victory in Jesus, the freedom, the liberty that a Christian ought to have, that where we can live in this beyond ourselves, we can live by hope, not by the distorted realities of man. We can live in a higher existence, in a higher plane with the Holy Spirit's guidance. But when we go back to falling on how we think and lean on our own understanding of somebody else just like us, folks, that gets us back into bondage. That's not liberty. We're going back to the slave state then. It says, but if you be led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. You're not under bondage. Folks, who wants to be a slave? Who wants to be under bondage? Jesus has the authority and the power, and He loves you and wants for you true freedom. If the Son sets you free, you're free indeed. Let us be free indeed. Let us receive our liberty. And let's not go back to the bondage of sin any longer. Walk by the Spirit and do not fulfill the lust of the flesh. Let us live by the ways of God. I pray you do that this week. There's not any better way to live. And I look forward to seeing you Sunday. Tell somebody about Jesus. Invite somebody to church. And we love you. We look forward to seeing you Sunday. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.